crowd of people who gathered along the lake of Galilee to hear Jesus thought about this parable that he gave them. Probably on the fields along the shore of the sea, there was a man sowing seed, preparing the soil for his harvest. I wonder what the folks thought about those remarks of Jesus. The disciples, and don't forget, we are disciples, the disciples pondered the parable, and then they came and asked Jesus the meaning. And that's exactly what a parable is supposed to do. It is supposed to provoke in our minds questions or thoughts that lead us on to a further understanding, especially an understanding of the God who Jesus came to reveal to us. So we are today's disciples. What questions does this parable provoke in us? We're living in a very sad time as disciples of Jesus, because with our fellow citizens, our whole life has been changed and constricted. We cannot celebrate the Eucharist, which is our primary experience of Jesus each week. But we need to remember that there are other ways to encounter Christ. The way we have been encountering him in the last few minutes in the words of the Bible, the words of sacred Scripture, because Jesus is just as really present in the Scripture as he is in the Eucharist. His manner of presence is different, but the same Christ is as really present in the words of the Scripture as he is in the bread and the wine of the Eucharist. The pandemic that we're undergoing has made it very, very impossible or infrequent for us to be able to experience Christ in the Eucharist. Our life has always also been changed because many of the other things that we normally do have been done away with for the time being, which means we have more time. So if we don't have the experience of Christ in the Eucharist, are we giving more time to the experience, the encounter with Christ in the words of Scripture? Surely that is something that we can do on a daily basis. Remember the disciples on the road to Emmaus? They met Jesus and didn't recognize him until he began to explain to them the words of Scripture. And then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us as he opened up the Scriptures to us?" We disciples today have to afford Jesus that same opportunity to open up the words of Scripture to us where we are on our road to Emmaus. We need to let Jesus explain to us the meaning of life as we are experiencing it in our day and in our time. The more frequently we experience Christ in the Eucharist, in the sacred Scripture, the more we come to know him. The more frequently we experience Christ in the Eucharist when possible, the more we come to know him. The more we experience Jesus in these times, we, especially in the daily Scripture and the weekly Eucharist, the more easily we will recognize him when we encounter him where he comes to us most often, every day. We will be able to experience him when we meet him in each other, the primary location of Jesus today. What you have done to one of the least of my brothers, or not done, you have done to me.